Donald Trump's first 100 days in office are over, and it is time to start criticizing him. I did not comment on the American elections when they were happening, because I don't think one should get too involved in the politics of another country and use their platform to tell people how to vote. Basically, although my channel is political by nature, I don't talk much about the political game. I like to dwell in the realm of ideas, not in the mud wrestling ring of politics. But now that President Trump is part of our lives, we need to position ourselves in accordance with this reality. In this video I would like to formulate my first thoughts on the matter, and I will do so from three perspectives. First, as a citizen of the free world, which Trump now leads. Secondly, as a member of the anti-SJW community. Third, as a left-wing liberal. So, when it comes to Trump being the leader of the free world, I always had serious doubts that he has the character needed to employ that position, and what I've seen so far did not assuage my doubts. To begin with, I don't like outsiders running for office. My experience is that they are often the most corruptible, the ones who are the most easily manipulated by the establishment, especially if they have a clean image. If someone has a clean image, it usually means that they never worked in an environment where they had to deal with a lot of dirty people, and will be eaten alive once they get into politics. A political party boasting that its members have a clean image is like a construction company telling you, look at all those other construction companies. Their workers are always sweaty and covered with dirt, whereas our workers have been working desk jobs all their lives, and never got this dirty. Thankfully, Trump does not have a clean image. He is a dirty motherfucker. But still, when it comes to politics and governance, it's very obvious that he doesn't know much about it, and that might make him easy to manipulate. An even bigger problem is that because he has such a big ego, he refuses to admit his ignorance. At least that's what it looks like. And if that is indeed the case, it is going to lead to a lot of bad decision making. And, again, it makes him easier to manipulate. It is hard not to see the latest American aggression towards Syria and North Korea as Trump being taken for a ride by the warhawks in the Pentagon, those who believe you can solve every problem by force. On top of that, Trump is also a liar. True, every politician lies, but Trump actually seems to believe his own lies. Other people's lies as well. We all laugh at how unreliable cable news is, but Trump seems to treat it as his main source of information. Worse, he seems to have the mentality of a conspiracy theorist, someone who prefers the fantastic explanation over the simpler one, or at least can't tell the difference between them. That is a very serious character flaw in a world leader. If that's not enough, he is also thin-skinned, and can't stand criticism or ridicule. Obviously, that is a very bad trait for a president of a democratic country. Finally, he is a terrible public speaker, and says things that politicians should not be saying. I know it all seems amusing now, when we are stifled by political correctness and it's fun to see him poke holes in it, but we have to remember that whatever an American president says is written in the history pages. 20 years from now, no one will remember what the situation was or how seriously we took what Trump says. All that will be remembered are the quotes. I mean, think about this famous quote.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're sending people that have lots of problems. And they're bringing those problems with us. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
When you say about a group of people they're rapists, the literal meaning is that they are all rapists. I don't think that this is what Trump meant to say, but the fact is that he said it. The literal interpretation of what he said here is, all Mexican immigrants are rapists, and some of these rapists might be good people. If that's not what he meant to say, then he should have retracted and apologized, but of course, that is not something that Trump does. He is going to cause a lot of diplomatic incidents with his mouth in the coming 4 years. Hopefully it won't be too bad, because everyone understands that you shouldn't take him too seriously. But in decades to come, anti-American propagandists will use these quotes to prove that the US is a racist state. So we are talking long-term damage here. For those reasons, I was anxious about the Trump presidency. I was hoping he would prove me wrong, and I still hope so, but I am not very encouraged by what I've seen so far. Hopefully, he will grow into the role. So I was never on board the Trump train, and I think that made me a minority in the anti-SJW community. I understand why. Hillary Clinton seemed to embody all the things that we fight against, whereas Trump was the anti-PC candidate. But in my view, winning an election is not that important. It is a lot more important to win the culture war. When you win the culture war, the political landscape changes in your favor. And I thought having Hillary as president will help us in the culture war, as it would have highlighted all the problems of social justice. A Trump presidency, I thought, will only strengthen the SJWs, give them the aura of fighters against the establishment. However, now that it has happened, I do see a ray of sunlight in a Trump presidency. What has happened since the election is that a lot of aggressive leftists have turned violent, or at least started justifying political violence. As I've been pointing out in my series about the regressive left, they have so far managed to conceal their extremely radical ideology, and made many liberals think that they are part of us. Turning to violence will tear off this mask and expose them for what they are, and then they will be marginalized. The downside is that people are going to get hurt in the process, but it is here where I actually think having Trump as a president can help. The last time the left went this crazy was in the late 1960s, and it led to a lot of left-wing terrorism in the 70s. In Europe, the terrorism carried on into the 80s, but in the US it was pretty much over by the mid-70s. Why? I would argue that a major part of it was that they felt like they've achieved something. Actually, they felt like they've achieved two things. One was the end of the Vietnam War, the other was the downfall of President Nixon. It's highly debatable that the radical left played any part in these two events, but they told themselves that they did, and that allowed them to feel like their efforts weren't a complete waste, and they could rejoin society. 2016 had a lot of similarities to 1968, the year that leftist politics in America went crazy, and Nixon was elected. I predict that we are going to see the regressive left turning from violence to actual terrorism very soon. But the regressives nowadays seem to be focusing all of their anger and hate on Trump, so hopefully, once he is no longer in office, and since it's Trump this might not even take 4 years, it will allow them to feel like they've achieved something, and snap out of this violent phase. Another thing I was concerned about was that the Trump presidency was going to split the anti-SJW movement, and the right-wing side of it would become pro-establishment. But I think we are beginning to see them moving away from Trump and taking a critical approach towards him. A lot of us are still focused more on the left, as it seems like they are still the ones who dominate the establishment. We need to remember that they only dominate the parts of the establishment that have been drawing our attention in the last couple of years, while the right dominates other parts. We should start diverting our attention to these parts as well, because the right is now going to be the one in control. If Trump does something bad, that is the thing we should be mainly focusing on, not on the unfair way in which the mainstream media covers it. We should rather provide an alternative to the mainstream media, by being more fair and accurate in our criticism. Most importantly, I think, we should acknowledge that the SJWs are right on one thing about Trump. He does have the character of a populist dictator. In a country where the democratic institutions are weaker than they are in America, I would be worried about the democracy if someone like Trump got elected. I am not worried about American democracy, but we should still be on the lookout against attempts to undermine it, and we should not contribute to the kind of rhetoric that can assist in the matter. For instance, I don't like the talk I'm hearing lately about a deep state. This is exactly how dictators take over. When the population starts to think that the establishment is working against them, and they turn to a strong leader and give him absolute power in order to destroy this establishment. The truth is that in every political system there is a class of politicians and bureaucrats who are running the apparatus, and this class sometimes serves its own interests instead of the people it is supposed to be serving. This is unavoidable, and in democratic societies it is much less bad than in other systems. So if you must talk about the deep state, try not to suggest that it can or should be dismantled. Also, we should not be backing Trump if he tries to harm the rights of the people we are fighting against, like the mainstream media, the academy, SJWs, Muslims, etc. The fight against them should be done by us, not by the government. It was fun seeing Trump sticking it to these people, but now that he is president, he should be everyone's president. On the other hand, let's not start screaming dictatorship whenever the Trump administration pushes some law that curbs your freedoms. Remember that every previous administration did that as well. Democracy is a dynamic thing, which tries to balance between freedom and security. Sometimes that necessitates a new law that curbs some freedoms for the sake of security, and sometimes it's the other way around. Trump's actions should be measured against this reality, not against some suspicion you might have that he wants to become a dictator. Finally, I'd like to view things from the perspective of a left-winger, and here I see some significant advantages to a Trump presidency. One of the aims of my channel is to help redefine the left, which has evidently lost its way. One of the first videos I made, and one that you should definitely watch if you want to understand where I come from, was called "Identity Politics Are Obsolete." I pointed out in that video that identity politics, the main flag of the left in the past few decades, are no longer necessary, and that they are now being applied in a way that is destructive and not constructive. The aim of identity politics was to help groups that were considered other to become part of society, and thus allow members of these groups to enjoy equality of opportunity. But the groups that it focused on, such as women, blacks and gays, are no longer seen as other, so there's no more need for identity politics in their case. I further noted that there are two new groups that are now the other of Western society. One are the Muslims, and the other are straight white men, which have been otherized by identity politics. Finally, I pointed out that our existing models of how to bridge our differences with the other do not apply in the case of Muslims, since this is a group that is different from the rest in that it shows internal resistance to integrate with the rest of society. Therefore, I concluded, the left must discard identity politics and develop new models of dealing with these new challenges. But the left failed to do so, and Donald Trump stepped into the void. He realized that straight white men feel attacked, and spoke to their feelings. He realized that Muslims are the feared other, and rode on that fear. And he added one more other which I didn't mention, in his attacks on illegal immigrants. This was one of the things that got him elected, and following his election he continues to be very aggressive, you might even say xenophobic, towards these groups. This is a golden opportunity for the American left to pose itself as an alternative on these issues, but instead, we see that they are still stuck in the previous mode. They blame Trump of being xenophobic, and from there they jump straight to accusing him and his voters of hating women, blacks and gays, even though his xenophobia is not aimed at these groups. But Trump continues to aggressively push on, and there's good reason to believe that this will eventually change the public discourse, and force the left to leave identity politics behind and deal with the relevant issues. So Trump might turn out to be the scalpel that was needed to remove the dead cells from the leftist mind, and make it regain its sanity. Another reason for Trump's victory was that he was seen as the anti-globalist candidate. Now, I am not an anti-globalist. I believe that we are inevitably moving towards a global society. I have friends and acquaintances all over the globe, and pretty much feel like I'm already a citizen of the world. But, of course, that is not the case, and we are still many decades away from a global society. This reality, however, seems to be lost on the political and business elites, whose world has already been globalized, and they don't realize that the rest of us are not there yet. And so, they make decisions that go against the will of their countrymen. Trump's election is part of a backlash against this class, a revolt against globalism and a return to nationalism. The left must acknowledge the situation, and come up with liberal versions of nationalism. We definitely don't want to leave it to the right, because history has shown us that the right-wing versions can become really ugly. Check out my video on nationalism for my thoughts about it. In short, what I'm saying is that there were certain problems that needed to be talked about, and that we couldn't honestly talk about because we were stifled by political correctness. If Trump doesn't cave in to political correctness, he will eventually compel everyone to start thinking and talking about these problems, and that will be beneficial for all of us, and especially for the left. And on this optimistic note, it's a good moment to end this video. I didn't go deep here, because this was just a quick video to adjust myself in the face of a Trump presidency. I'm going to continue to focus mainly on the left, and try to help it find its way again. But I know that I also have a lot of right-wing viewers, and they too could benefit from having their side criticized on the ideological level. To them I say, don't worry, I suspect that once the reality of a Trump presidency settles in, there will be lots to criticize. So, stay tuned.